20 minutes from here. Really impressive. I mean, one of the things that they're doing is they're actually teaching kids, who would have ever thought, about the history of the country, about its founding, about the Constitution, and to be proud of our country rather than to be ashamed of it. 25% of people who were supposed to show up for the military last year did not. 25% recruitment deficit. You don't know why? People don't want to serve a country that they're taught to despise. And that's what we're teaching our kids today. And so I think we've got to start thinking on the time scales of history rather than on the time scales of election cycles. That's what it's going to take to revive a nation for the next generation. And I'm so grateful for you to be one of those few people who did make the decision to serve our country. There are many ways to serve. There are many ways to study the history of our country. But right now we're doing very little of them. And the good news is I think we can turn that around. I think it is absolutely possible to do it. It's hiding in plain sight. But we're just going to have to think bigger to do it. So that's why, even in my last book, I talked about this idea. You want to raise the voting age, that's going to make a lot of people at least pay attention. Maybe that's the first thing we need people to do is to pay attention. And then say, you know what, we actually already require men, when they turn 18 years old, to register with selective service. All of us men in this room did it. Let's make it for men and women. We live in an age of equality. Let's practice what we preach. But say that's not just a motion you go through. That is something that means you're a citizen. That's a requirement to be able to say if you want to vote under the age of 25, you better darn well have had that civic-minded mentality. You know, my mom became an immigrant. She had to pass a test. She was an immigrant. When she became a citizen, she had to pass a test. They ask you some questions. Who are the 3 people who wrote the Federalist Papers? John Jay, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton. How many amendments are there to the U.S. Constitution? There's 27 amendments. Well, I think it's great that we require somebody who comes from another country to want to be a citizen of this country to know something about it. I want kids who grow up in this country. I want my kids who grow up in this country when they turn 18 to darn well know something about the country too, because that is what it means to be a citizen and to love a country that you want to serve. Thank you for that question. It's important. Thank you. Please.
So I went to Merritt-based high school in California, Lowell High School, and I saw you went to Yale, Harvard,
Yeah.
and I see on your pamphlet that you're for Merritt. What's your position on critical race theory and all the things that they're trying to do across the country to remove admissions or just academic excellence overall?
So I'll tell you, I'll make this very first personal to me. Okay. I remember the moment in 1993 when I was in 2nd grade at Evendale Elementary in Southwest Ohio when I heard Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech for the first time. That was a speech where he said, I hope my 4 children grow up in a country where they're judged not on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character. And that stuck with me. It meant something to me. Because it was the dream that allowed me to achieve everything I have in my life. Going from being the kid of immigrants who came to this country with almost no money to becoming the founder of a multi-billion-dollar biotech company that I led and built as a CEO. That meant something to me. The modern critical race narrative rejects that dream that Martin Luther King had 60 years ago. It rejects the dream that allowed me to achieve everything I ever have in my life and in this country. It is a form of psychological slavery to tell a kid that you are in an oppressed category because the genetic characteristics you inherit on the day you're born. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of the Squad. It's not just me. Don't take it from me. Take it from Don Lemon, who told me on CNN a week and a half ago, before he got fired, right? And I think the culture is changing in this country, but says, he told me on set, when you have black skin, then you can disagree with me. Ayanna Pressley of the Squad says, we don't want any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. I don't fit her description of what counts as a brown voice, but there's nothing more racist than to say that the color of your skin predicts something about the content of your character and your ideas. And so I reject that. And I think one of the things that we have to do better in our movement, right? Because I've noticed something. I wrote books, I've traveled the country. I feel like I'm playing a game of whack-a-mole, right? You know, wokeism, racial wokeism pops up here. We got that one down. Transgenderism over here. Pop that one down. Climate cult, now popping up in America. COVIDism, climatism. We're on the defensive side if we're just playing whack-a-mole. All of these things are really part of... I met 2 doctors in the back. Okay, I'll speak in in your language, my wife's a doctor, in our language, they're symptoms. They're symptoms of a deeper cancer. It's a hunger for purpose. Right, I'm 37 years old. I'm the first millennial ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. Actually. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll just tell you something about my generation. On behalf of, I think it's probably true of all generations. It's definitely true of mine. We're hungry for purpose. We're hungry for identity. We're hungry for meaning. At a time in American history when the things that, it's like the alarm is going off on America, right? We got to do something. It's serious, right? When the things that used to fill our hunger, faith, patriotism, hard work, family, you name it, all of these things are gone at the same time. We're lost. And so when we have that vacuum, that is when poison fills the void. That is when wokeism or transgenderism or climatism, that becomes the new God. Right? Blaise Pascal, I studied science in undergrad, right? Blaise Pascal, one of my favorite scientists and mathematicians, he said it well. When you have a hole the size of God in your heart and God does not fill it, something else will instead. And I think the same is true of a nation and belief in a nation. That's what's going on. So what we need to do in our movement is, and I'm not criticizing anybody else. This is self-criticism here, self-reflection. We need to step up and say we're not just going to criticize race, gender, sexuality, climate. We've done that, and that's important. We have our own vision. Revive the idea of the individual, that there's one you. There will never be another you. You're not some member of a tectonic plate of color of person, group identity. You are you. That we believe in the family, that two parents bring you into this world, a mother and a father, and that means something. That you actually are a citizen of a nation, this nation, and that you're proud of it, not some nebulous global citizen. And that, yes, we do believe that we are one nation under God, that there is a higher power that guides us through this life that's more than just the aimless passage of time. That's our vision. And I think that we in our movement will. This is what the 2024 election is about. It's not just about criticizing the endless, and I did that on TV just now, criticize the Biden agenda. That's fine. We got to recognize the problem, but we got to level up and say this is our own vision, this is what we stand for. That's what Ronald Reagan, the last president who did that for this country in 1980, he led a national revival. That is what I'm running to do. In 2024, as Reagan did in 1980, we can lead this nation to a revival and abandon this idea of a national divorce. We don't have to go there. We can be one nation under God again, and I thank you for that question. Thank you.
Stacey Dale, and question. I've heard a lot about domestic, and I love it.
Yep.
Where do you stand on the international stage with dealing with Ukraine, to Kim Jong-un in North Korea, to President Xi? How do you approach that coming in as a businessman?
Sure thing. So I'll give you direct answers. And first thing I'll say is, how did everybody in here, not even everybody who votes for me, have to agree with 100% of what I say? I'll just tell you 100% of the time what I actually think. So, give a direct answer on Ukraine. I would not give another dollar of aid to Ukraine. I think that that's not our war fight. However, the moral of the story, though, is that Vladimir Putin would have never gone for Ukraine if we actually had energy self-sufficiency in America. Because he had more leverage by saying that Europe is dependent on Russian oil and gas because the United States wasn't providing anymore because we put ourselves in a straitjacket because of the climate call. That's the real lesson there. It's not just anti-helping Ukraine. Let's learn from it. Energy security is national security. That's part of my foreign policy vision. Foreign policy, like anything in business too, is about prioritization. My top priority is declaring independence from communist China. I think we have an opportunity. Thank you. We have an opportunity to do it. Now is our window to do it. So not a lot of people know this. China's in a weaker spot than we are because Xi Jinping shot himself in the foot last year with the zero COVID policies, which had as much to do with COVID as our climate cult has to do with the climate, which is to say nothing at all. It's about power and control, but he ruined his economy. This is the moment where I'm sitting across the table from Xi Jinping. I'll tell him, we are pulling out. We're going to ban most U.S. businesses from doing business in China unless you finally reform. No theft, no data theft, no intellectual property theft, None of these practices where you turn companies into your little pawns to do your lobbying work here in the U.S., not Chinese Communist Party buying land here in America. No, we're putting an end to that unless here's exactly what you do or else I mean what I say. Okay, we're not playing small ball here. We're not thinking about quarterly earnings reports. We're thinking about the time scales of history. We're thinking about a little more Churchill, a little less Chamberlain in our foreign policy. And that's what we need, is some fortitude and to actually mean it. And then he's going to say, all right, fine, we fold and meet your demands. But you have, it's like my parents taught me. You can make a sacrifice if you know what you're sacrificing for. In that case, this is this thing we call America. And you won't have to make that sacrifice if you're actually willing to make it. That's the secret, not just for success in business, but for success in geopolitics. I think the same principle applies. And the one final thing is, here's something the US president can do. It's a shame that he's not doing it now. I will do it if you put me there. I will end the fentanyl crisis in this country, which starts in China. They're shipping raw materials from, I'm not making this up, from Wuhan, that end up in the hands of Mexican drug cartels for low cost, that's pressing fentanyl, even illegally, into other counterfeit drugs, crossing our border. 200 people die in a day. 50 times the number of people who died on 9/11 are dying each year in this country due to fentanyl overdoses. It's like China's opium war on us. I think that if we can use, to tie this back to your Ukraine point, where we have recently learned that there are US troops on the ground in Ukraine, I think that's an affront. They didn't tell us that. Well, if we can use the US military to secure somebody else's border, I will use the US military to secure our own border. That is how you understand it. Real quick, and then I'll go here. Real quick, and then we'll go here. I want to get to the other. Real quick, and then we'll go to the other question. Real quick, yep. And then.
On the Ukraine agreement that was signed in the 1990s,
yes.
What do you say to the Ukrainians that let go of their
I think we have already honored our commitment pursuant to that, is the answer to that. So I believe the U.S. has to stand for its word. I think we have more than honored that commitment. Great question. I'll just give you a quick answer because I want to go to that question. But that's my view. We have to stand by our word, and we did, and we've done more than that. So that's more where I lay on. Thank you.
Yes, sir. My name is Bryce Harris. I'm retired with 39 and a half years in the military. I'm a student at the University of South Carolina. I'm a Gamecock. Sir, I'm going to expound on with regard to gaming going forward. You're going to have your naysayers. They're going to say, we don't like betting. There's a difference, as I have learned in my degree program, tourism management at the College of Hospitality, Retail, and Sport Management. Gaming involves, yes, having a casino. However, gaming also includes entertainment, a restaurant, and lodging. Gambling is simply going to some little place with a bunch of machines and a partially dim light bulb and drinking beer. That is not what gaming is. So going forward, your people you talk to, let them know that it's gaming and it's not betting.
I appreciate that, man. I really, if I take one theme away from this lunch, I'm going to remember that. And I'll tell you one small thing, because this relates to the ESG movement. Anybody here heard of ESG? Does that mean anything to anybody? Okay. So here's what's happening. I mean, I know a little bit more than you might have guessed from the first answer. What's happening is that they're actually using financial institutions to do through the back door what they couldn't get done through the front door under the Constitution. So California and New York are effectively saying that to BlackRock and other firms, if they don't adopt these climate agendas and these social agendas, but one of these social agendas is actually relating to not lending to gaming companies or tobacco or firearms companies, then they're going to not be able to manage the money of CalPERS or New York. And so that's actually one of the areas where the gaming industry has been affected, is not just through regulation, but the thing that really gets my feathers up is using backdoor mechanisms to use your own money to create a country that you didn't vote for. And I think that's one of the things that, it's not just gaming, it relates to firearms companies, relates to oil and gas companies, coal companies, and even nuclear energy companies. That's actually one of the things that we got to wake up to. Not all of the answers are coming through politics, guys. I say this as somebody who's running for US president. There's no silver bullets. It's going to take everybody doing their part in your own everyday lives. You don't just vote every November. You vote every day with your dollars, actually, whether or not you know it. So make sure that you know whether your money was used to vote for an emissions cap, or a gaming ban policy, or a zero emissions policy, or racial equity program.
Or Bud Light.
Chances are, or transgenderism in corporate America today, chances are it was, actually. And so even as somebody who's running for president, voting for me is not going to be the end-all be-all. That's just one of the things. Learn for yourself the way your own money is being used every day. You don't have to wait till next November to vote. You can educate yourself now. It's part of why I've written the books I have, traveled the country. I actually started, my last company was a company called Strive that competes directly against BlackRock to offer alternatives to everyday Americans. We need to, it's an all-of-the-above approach. In the cultural moment we're in, it's not just politicians. It's going to be people starting those charter schools. It's going to be people who are volunteering in their community. It's going to be people who start new businesses. It's going to be consumers who get educated on how their own money is being misused. That's what it's going to take to drive this national revival. It's a great reminder of that point. Thank you, my man.
You have a pharmaceutical background, right?
I did start a biotech, yep.
Okay. Gain of function research is probably the biggest threat to our everyday security that exists right now, period. No question about it. And Biden administration had in their, I think it was in the omnibus budget, that they were going to research every virus known to man for the genetic whatever. I'm not as smart as you, obviously.
I don't know that.
What are you going to do to stop gain of function research and stop the incentive that pharmaceutical companies have to engage in that in places like Ukraine and Wuhan from creating diseases that then they can sell us vaccines for?
So, I hope everybody else, raise your hand if you know what the question's about gain of function research. Does that mean something? Okay. Many of you, but not all of you. So it's basically a form of research that involves engineering into viruses properties that viruses don't usually have. That's what it's all about. That's a problem because it creates the risk of, who would have ever thought, a global pandemic that we now know was the product of a man-made virus in a lab that had properties that don't exist in nature. So just to get that straight for everybody, in the name of doing research to prevent a global pandemic, that form of research literally created that global pandemic. Think about that for a second. That's upside down. So what we need to do in this country is simple, but the problem is we've already done it. We banned gain-of-function research. We had rogue government actors who deserve to be held liable for that, including the likes of Anthony Fauci. This is true. Who went through the back door to fund it abroad instead. That is a violation of law and needs to be treated as such. And if you don't, it's not because I have vengeance towards some individual. I think we can't be guided by vengeance, we have to be guided by principle. If you don't hold people accountable for breaking the law, you can expect the same thing to happen again in the future. And this is where, I'm getting a little warm in here. I'm gonna take this off. I'm getting heated up here, okay? Connor's here also take my my thing, yeah. We're recording some of these questions. These are great questions. Actually, we'll put my little microphone on and see if you guys can't even hear me a little better. But here's the thing. This is where I want to build on the foundation that Trump laid. I respect him. I was a big supporter of Trump. He's a friend of mine. But this is where we've got to take that agenda far further than he ever went with it. Where the next time an Anthony Fauci, or for that matter, a James Comey or Merrick Garland, reaches beyond their scope, you don't just complain about it, right? You don't just leak it to the press. You fire them. You fire the managerial industrial complex around them. You fire the legions of people under them. And when they broke the law, you hold them accountable for actually breaking the law, just like you would for any other citizen. That's what it's actually going to take to go the distance. And it is my view that we can go even further if we're doing it based on first principles and moral authority, not just vengeance and grievance. That will allow us to go far further, build on that foundation, but actually take this to the finish line That's what it's going to take to drive a national revival. And some of these agencies, I said it on the interview, I mentioned one of them, the Department of Education. Some of these agencies shouldn't even exist in the first place.
Yes.
I'm going to shut them down. So that's actually what it's going to take. You can't tinker around the edges and complain about the deep state. You have to gut it. That's what it's actually going to take to get the job done.
How do you, okay, follow-up question. How do you keep them from getting to you and destroying your character and all that? How do you plan to deal with that?
Well, it's not going to prevent them. It's going to happen. But I can do my best to not make it easy for them. Right? We have lived our lives in a way that will allow me on good footing to, when I talk about the importance of family, when I talk about the importance of faith, that's how we live our lives. My two kids will be here later today. Okay, we travel as a family. We're grounded in the values that we preach. That's not going to stop them from making God knows what up. Okay, it's just the game we're entering. That's the game we play. But my responsibility to you, to go the distance, is to make sure we make it as darn hard for them as we possibly can. And if we're doing it based on principles, tying the what of what we're doing to the why, the principles that set the country into motion, I think we actually unite a good part of this country, 80% plus of this country. It's not 50-50, I think 80+% of this country. We can unite around those basic principles. Last person to do that was Ronald Reagan. He led a national revival in 1980 when we were going through a national identity crisis in the late 1970s. He led us out of it to a revival. I think we can do that in 2024. But it's going to take building on Trump's foundation, but going far further. And I'll leave this idea with you guys too, is America First does not belong to one man. Doesn't belong to Trump. Doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you, the people of this country. Who is going to take that agenda further? I'm 37 years old. I'm a millennial. I've got fresh legs. Maybe 8 years from now, I'll be tired and jaded and cynical, but that's going to happen when they come for you. It's just what happens. Right? I think Trump's not the same person he was 8 years ago. We're human beings. Right? None of us is a god. But as human beings, we're going to do the best we possibly can. We pass the torch on to the next guy. I see a national revival ahead, and I'm running to lead it. So thank you, man. I appreciate that. Thank you.
My name's Gary Young from Lexington, South Carolina. Given today's conditions, tomorrow is your first day in office. What would you focus on day one?
Day one?
Yes,
Okay.
day one.
So day one doesn't mean it's the most important or not. It's what I literally can do on day one. Okay? Day one, you don't ask Congress for permission. You do the things that a U.S. president can do without asking anybody for permission or forgiveness. I will end race-based affirmative action in America. That's how you do it. How can you do that? It was created by an executive order under Lyndon Johnson. I will take a pen and cross it out. We're done with that cancer on our national soul. That's the best manifestation, or the worst manifestation, of critical race theories, these racial quotas. I'll end it. I will abandon the climate cult, and here's how. I will issue an executive order that says we are done even measuring or mandating the measurement of carbon emissions in our economy. We're done with it. I will not apologize. I will put into motion a plan to send our military to our own southern border. Wherever they're sitting, relocate them, put them on the southern border. I don't need anybody's permission to do that as our commander-in-chief, okay? I will take the list of agencies we've already identified. The Department of Education, the FBI, the IRS, the ATF, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Those are the 5 we've already publicly announced, and there will be more to come. And we will shut them down. Now, we will, certain of them, replace them with something new, but the executive order is we shut them down, and across the administrative state, we will say that if I can't work for the federal government for more than 8 years as your next president, and by the way, I think that's a good thing, then neither will nearly any of the federal bureaucrats working for me either. That will be the law of the land. And that's day one. So there you go. Thank you.
Well, what do we do about the Chinese land that's being bought
The
out?
Chinese land is an easy problem to solve, right? We can literally just say, if you're literally an affiliate of the CCP, you cannot be a dutiful landowner here in the United States. Full stop. They already do it in China. Actually, a lot of people don't know this. Most Chinese stocks of companies, they don't let U.S. persons own them. It's not like we're reinventing the wheel, but they're looking to exercise leverage over the U.S. economy and over the future of our country. I refuse to stand by as a passive bystander and watch that happen. Now, it's not just that our current president is lazy about this. I think he's compromised by it, because I think that he's himself made money off the Chinese Communist Party. It puts him in a position to not make this a high priority issue. For me, it's an easy thing we can do. Now, that doesn't automatically solve all of our China problems. That's just like one small one that we can easily solve. The big ones I talked about earlier, we need to decouple from the Chinese economy. And that's not going to be easy. I have a clear vision of how to do it. I think it's going to require some willingness, I'm honest about this, some willingness to make a short-run sacrifice. But as I said, you can make a sacrifice if you know what you're sacrificing for. Okay? First person to ask that question. You made a sacrifice. Well, if you want to declare independence from Communist China, that's the Declaration of Independence that my favorite president, Thomas Jefferson, would have signed if he were alive today. That is the Declaration of Independence that I will sign. But the Chinese ownership of land, the CCP affiliates owning land, that one's easy. We'll get that one done in the first month in office, no problem. I think most people in this country are behind that. So thank you for the question. We'll take a couple more, and then we'll stick around for a little bit.
Yes, in 2016, 2020, Trump got about 40% of the evangelical vote. How do you plan to have people support you, the evangelical voters?
By speaking honestly, speaking candidly. So I'll be very honest with you. I'm a Hindu. I'm raised as a Hindu, practicing Hindu. I went to Catholic school. Actually, when I was in Catholic school, something about it where you come to reading the Bible for the first time, you almost value it more. Like if I'd gone to a Hindu school, I'd be rolling my eyes just like the other classmates were when they were reading the Bible. For me, it actually meant something to me. And to me, what I learned was that this nation was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. It's just a fact of history. What I learned is that the principles and the family that I was raised into shares those same values deeply, right? So in the Christian tradition, we'll say we're equal. Where does our notion of equality come from? Did it show up in a vacuum? No. We're equal in the eyes of each other because we are equal in the eyes of God. That's the way we say it in a Judeo-Christian tradition here in America. The way I grew up learning it is we are all equal because God resides in each of us. Right? So we say it maybe slightly differently. We're saying the same thing. And I think that this idea of reviving God in our culture, let me tell you something. God has become a four-letter word in America, okay? Part of the reason that many Christians, practicing Christians who are politicians, even in this Republican field, they shy away from it, or they'll just say something very scripted, is that they're afraid of being labeled by a culture that puts secularism or new religions in charge. This isn't even between secularism and religion. This is about new religions, like you don't have Christ, now you have climate. That's what's going on in the country. What I'll be able to do is I'm a staunch defender of religious liberty. Liberty means having religious liberty in this country. The Equality Act, I don't know if you know it, that was just recently passed. Might as well call it the Inequality Act for the infringement on religious liberties and organizations in this country. But the deal I'll make with the evangelical Christian community is you don't have to hold your nose and vote for me, okay? I think that's what many might have done over the last 8 years. I live by the values that you want to pass on to our children and the next generation of Americans. I believe in God. I will not apologize for it. I will talk about my faith openly, and we raise our kids in that same tradition. And I also stand for religious liberty, but here's the difference. I will stand and hold that line, and nobody is going to accuse me of being a Christian nationalist and try to shut me up as I do it, because that wouldn't make very much sense. And the question of how we get that job done, that was part of the pitch that Trump made too, and I respect him for putting the right Supreme Court justices in office, overturning Roe versus Wade. These are milestones. I'm staunchly pro-life myself. But I want to do it as somebody who, to be really honest with you, let's get real, I want to be able to look my son in the eye and tell him, I want you to grow up to be like him. We haven't had that in this country since Ronald Reagan. Okay, we can talk about family values or faith in God all we want. We have to be grounded in the leadership. Part of the role of the U.S. president is not just to lead with policy in the day one executive orders. That's important. That's the job description. But part of the job description is serving as a model for the next generation of Americans. And if you have a president who's willing to talk about the fact that we are a nation founded under one nation under God, what that means to me in the way we live our lives, the way we raise our children, the fact that you can only experience the love of God once you've actually experienced the love of your family. This is the way we live our life too. And I think setting that example is something that we've missed for about 40 years in this country. And as a member of my generation, right, as I said, I'm 37, I'm a millennial. I want to make these concepts cool for the next generation of Americans. This isn't just some old traditional values stuff. This is actually the new thing. We're going to bring that back in a way that doesn't have to make that a taboo topic. If I may use a biblical analogy to describe what I see in our culture today, we are like the Israelites who escaped from Pharaoh. We earned our freedom. When they're lost in the desert, the book of Exodus, what did they say? They said, we want to go back and be ruled by Pharaoh. We're going to bend, if you don't bend the knee to God, you're going to bend the knee to something. Climate, transgenderism, whatever it is. We just got to wake up to that reality. But Moses came down from the mountaintop, what had they done? They built the golden calf. By the time he even made it down from the top. We're going to worship something. We're going to bend the knee to something. We're human beings. If you stop believing in God, you're going to believe in something. It's just going to be something that you don't even recognize as a religion. And that's what's going on in America today. So I understand that deeply as a person of faith, and I'm not going to fake it. I'm an unapologetic Hindu practicing my faith as I see it, but I stand for the revival of faith in America more than anybody in either party, even this Republican Party, does. I'm not going to check that box by saying what I'm supposed to say. I think the evangelical community is smarter than that. You can tell a fake from a real person. You can tell somebody who lives their life the way that actually models behavior for the next generation versus somebody who doesn't. In the case of what that means for our country, that's going to be up to you or anyone. I don't know if you consider yourself part of this community or not, but the evangelical community to decide. But what I'm seeing as we travel the country is we're building that trust and that common foundation because we share those values actually in common rather than just the labels we apply and then try to flaunt it. That's not the way I'm doing it. It's my honest answer to your question. I think, and I hope to earn, it's my job to earn it. I hope to earn the trust of evangelical Christians across this country to be the candidate that they support based on the values that we share in common. And over the next year, I think we're actually going to do it. So, thank you.
My name is Will Galloway, and I work in the energy and agriculture policy field. And I really appreciate what you're saying about nuclear energy independence, that sort of thing. But my family's also farmed the same land for almost 200 years now. And given the agricultural regulatory environment, it's really hard for small farmers, mid-sized farmers to grow things in America. So what changes do you think need to happen in the regulatory environment for agriculture to make it possible to grow things here?
Thank you. Great question. Thank you for that personal connection to your family, too. It's something to be proud of. 200 years, you said?
200 years, very short.
A little humbling, isn't it? Think about, it didn't all start with you. It's been here long before us, and if we do our jobs, it'll be here long after we're gone, too. I think the ESG cancer is a big part of that threat to farmers across the country. The assault on, even I was in Iowa, for example, the regulatory, what we'll call WOTUS, the waters of the United States, the way they're regulated, the burdens that actually puts on farmers. It's less of an issue here, but even in other parts of the country, maybe it's an issue here too. Windmills, what that does to actually, through eminent domaining land to be able to advance the Green New Deal agenda. I think probably the top threat we face from a farming community perspective in terms of real threats that are coming is the climate agenda itself. I think climate agenda is an excuse to basically do anything you want to anybody as long as you invoke the climate in the process. And that's created a regulatory morass that I think we would want to relieve to let. Here's the vision of the Jeffersonian yeoman, right? Thomas Jefferson's yeoman. He may not be the wealthiest person in America, but he lives the American dream because part of the American dream is saying, I'm my own man. I'm not dependent on anybody. I'm dependent on myself through my own hard work mixed with my labor and my soil to create things in this world, to sustain myself, and then to provide sustenance to the others through our system of capitalism. That's what it means to be American. And I think that we've lost part of that culture, and as the culture of valuing that self-sustenance that Jefferson had in mind when he wrote that Declaration of Independence. It's not just a Declaration of Independence from Old England. It's just not just even a Declaration of Independence from China. It's a Declaration of Independence by me as an individual, and that I'm going to stand by it. And I think that farmers across this country represent that vision of America. We have a regulatory state that's really hamstringing you, putting you in handcuffs. We'll take the handcuffs off starting with that climate cult. And I think that that'll be the best I can do as a U.S. president to breathe the lifeblood back into families like yours across the country.
This guy's got a question over here.
Thank you. We'll make this the last one, and then I'll wrap, and I'll stick around, and we'll chat. Thank you.
You know, we've talked a bit about some of your visions. What is your vision to reach out to Republicans who look like me? The minorities that we as the Republican Party have so long have not reached out to. What's your vision to start reaching out, bringing us in, bringing those folks in we know will help you win
Yep.
Your presidency?
And folks that look like you, folks that look like me, frankly. 70% of Indian Americans went for Joe Biden last cycle when they have no reason to do it. So here's the reality. I think that the policies that we implemented in this country to help black Americans have been disastrous for all Americans, including black Americans. Okay? Lyndon Johnson's Great Society was the biggest misnomer in American political history. It's been disastrous for Americans of every color. Thank you. And I know you know this, but I want everybody here to know this. In 1960, before that, it was passed, over 70% of black kids were born into two-parent households, a mom and a dad in the house. Now it's less than 30% the other way. How do I bring people in? I don't blame black Americans for that. I blame our government for that, for giving them the incentives to actually have one parent in the house. So we're going to fix that problem, not by blaming people who, single mothers say, put yourself in her shoes. I'm going to make more money by being married to Uncle Sam instead of this guy. Well, a lot of people end up making that decision, and that's how you get what you pay for. By the way, affirmative action or race-based wokeism or critical race theory, psychological slavery, teaching a black kid in this country that you can't achieve something because of the color of your skin. I'll tell you something about me. I went to a racially diverse school, 1st through 8th grade, public school. I think it was close to majority black. If not, it was majority black. There wasn't a single one of those black kids that couldn't achieve everything that I have in my life. I've founded multi-billion-dollar companies. I lived the American dream. If they had the actual privilege that I did, and it's not that I grew up in money, I did not. It's that I had two parents in the house with a focus on education and achievement. And so let's focus on how we actually solve the upstream problem rather than using these Band-Aid solutions that might make us feel good, but not actually solving the problem, actually making it worse. And I think that black people, I think all people, but black people included across this country, are smart enough to know when they're being sold a false bill of goods. And they've been sold a false bill of goods. We're going to sell the real thing and actually deliver it. And I'll use that to bridge into some comments to wrap this up. You guys have been patiently waiting for here. Thank you for rolling with us through the TV hit and everything else. I'm told it looked great on TV, so thank you. You want one more? Let's take one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. We got it. Yeah.
In 60 seconds, how are you different from Trump?
How am I different from Trump?
Yeah.
Good. That is a great question, because I'm asking, this is an election. Here's how I'm different from Trump. I'm closer to Trump in 2015 than Trump today is to Trump in 2015. That's the answer. What he did in 2015 actually inspires a guy like me. Live the American dream. Now, I didn't start with any money, but live the full arc of the American dream, achieve success, do not apologize for it, tear down bureaucracy or anybody who stands in the way. That was Trump in 2015. He's shown on the debate stage. What they're asking me about on TV, now he's saying he might not even want to participate in those debates. That's not the same person. I'm not blaming him. Like I said, I might be different 8 years from now, right? I'll have a few more pounds on me too and some gray hair, and that's fine. We'll pass the torch on to the next guy. But I'm the guy with fresh legs, with the energy. You get to be an outsider once. He did a great job as an outsider. Now I'm taking that to the next level. But the biggest difference is I am not motivated today by vengeance and grievance. I'm not running from something. I am running to something. The thing we're running to, it's not just me, we're running to something. It is a vision of what it means to be American. And here's what I will say, to put America first. And he was the OG, right? The original gangster of America first. I'll give him credit for that. But to put America first, we have to rediscover what America is. We have forgotten that. And I'm looking to lead us there. And I will go further with that agenda, that America First agenda, than Trump ever did by a lot of those day one things that I'll do on day one. Well, we had 4 years to do it. He did a lot of things. He didn't do those things. I'm going to pick up where he left off and then go miles further. We'll chat a little bit after, in the interest of just not keeping everybody, hold people hostage here. I'll wrap this up with some closing thoughts. I'll stay here to chat one-on-one. But I'll close with this on a first personal note with those last couple of questions. I grew up into an era in our country, last 10, 20 years, where we were taught to celebrate our diversity and our differences. So much that we forgot all of the ways we are actually the same as Americans. See, that's what we forgot in this country. Our diversity is a fine thing. We have some different skin shades of melanin. We have a few in this room. So be it. It's great. We have a couple different genders, 2 of them to be precise. Okay, that's fine. There's 2 genders. Okay, so that's good. So we are diverse. That is meaningless unless there's something greater that binds us together across that diversity. Those are the ideals that bound us together. We say e pluribus unum, from many one, for a reason. You see, that's the vision that won the American Revolution. That's the vision that reunited us back after the Civil War. It's the vision that won us 2 world wars and a Cold War. It is still the vision that gives hope to the free world. And I truly believe it. If we can revive that vision over fractious group identity and victimhood and grievance, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus, is going to stop us. That is what this idea of American exceptionalism is all about. And that's what we're going to revive to save this country. We are not some nation in decline. Like, we're not Rome. We're not Carthage. We're just a little young, going through our own version of adolescence. We're figuring out who we really are. Once we figure that out, nobody is going to stop us. I'm going to lead us to the next 8 years of that in our national journey. I'm only going to do it if everybody here does their part too. It's going to take all of us. There isn't somebody coming from political on high from the White House to save us. It doesn't work that way. It's going to take every one of us doing our part too. And so if you do your part, I promise you, I will do mine. Thank you. God bless you all. God bless our country. God bless you.